Good afternoon, everybody. It's July 22nd. This is Interviewing Wednesday. We're very glad you're with us. For those of you who are on Zoom, if you have questions, we please ask that you use the chat box. That way you can ask questions just as soon as you think about it. And as Walt pauses throughout his presentation, we can take a look at the chat box and make sure we get all your questions answered for you. For those on Facebook, I am monitoring the Facebook feed. Please enter your questions into the comment box and I'll make sure that we get those questions asked also. If you are using Zoom, at the very top, there's view options. It allows you to flip back and forth between a speaker view and a gallery view. And you see those at the very bottom. We ask if you would to go to speaker view so that you can see the speaker big on one side and then the slide on the other. And where that red arrow is right there in the middle, you can drag that back and forth so you can make the speaker bigger or smaller depending on how big you want to watch Walt talk today. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channels for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, and if you post a comment in the chat box or have your microphone or camera on, you give consent for your comments, name, and pictures to appear. Well, good afternoon. My name is Jeff Morris. I founded Career DFW back in 2008 to help the unemployed in the DFW area. In 2012, I started CareerUSA.org after a visit to the White House, finding out that there really was nobody else doing something on a bigger picture like we were doing here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I facilitate and lead the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. We've been meeting since 2007. And at this end of this presentation, I'll tell you about our upcoming speaker for this Friday. I'm also a member of the practice interview team, and I've been doing that since 2017. So before we get to our speaker, I thought we'd let you know what the practice interview team is. So Mark, would you like to say a few words?
All right, thank you, Jeff. And I see some new names here and some new faces, although a lot of people have their video turned off. So welcome, and I'm eager to hear what Walt is going to share with us today. The pit crew has gone virtual. We've been virtual since the middle of March when the shutdown began for COVID. We use the Zoom technology just like we're doing today, and it works really well. I was so surprised the first few times I did it, how realistic it was compared to being face-to-face. Now, there are a few differences, obviously, and we now cover those in your practice interviews, how to interact with the camera, how your lighting looks, how your background looks, and things like that if you're looking away excessively. So those are all part of the practice interview now, but in addition, when you provide a resume and your job description, we go to work like we always have, giving you a customized and personalized interview experience. So now the interviews happen any day of the week, and I just had a request come in this morning, and so we're aiming to have her practice interview on Friday. So it takes a couple of days to set these up, because I have to organize not only your time, the candidate's time, but also the panelists' times when they're available. So once we get that set up, we'll have the interview as quickly as we can. And you need to send your job description and resume to the email there that Jeff circled in red, dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. That's a good way to do it, and also a good way to reach me if you have some questions you'd like to ask a question about interviewing. And also the phone number is there. Let me say that one other thing that I do, and I like to mention on these Wednesday meetings, is besides running the pit crew, is I also provide coaching on one specific question, and that question is, why did you leave your last position? Now, for some people, that's pretty straightforward. COVID came along and they worked in the hospitality industry and, they got let go. But for others, it may be a little more complicated. You may have been the only one laid off. There may have been some extenuating circumstances that you believe led to your departure. So that's what I help people have confidence in how they tell that story and how they tell or answer any questions that may come up afterwards, right? So there's the initial question, why'd you leave your last job? And then there's follow-up questions you want to be well prepared to answer. So we'll go through all of that. We do that on the phone, or we can do a Zoom conference, but it's a confidential discussion So just reach out to me if you'd like to schedule a time for that. And I think that's about it. Thanks, Jeff.
Great, Mark. Thank you very, very much. All right. Well, today our speaker is Walt Glass. He's going to talk about distinctive interviewing. So Walt, please take it away. Walt, you're muted.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Walt Glass here. Can't tell you how much fun it is to look into a camera. I really miss being in the group meetings and seeing people face to face and working that way rather than this. But we'll do the best we can with what we have available due to the circumstances that are surrounding us. So let me tell you that in my world today, being retired, I've tried to focus on what is it that I could do. You know, it's one of those questions we ask ourselves, now that you're retired, what happens? And so I remember back in my days of working with EDS for about 25 years in leadership development, working with people on the hiring side. I've always felt like the training for people to learn how to hire and interview people was very much lacking in the corporate world. So I focused, one of the pieces of the things I did was to focus on that and to help our hiring managers and our teams that did interviewing to do a lot better job of interviewing and selecting. It's one of the most critical things a company can do. Finding the right person in the right place at the right time is so strong a decision. And I just didn't think that we were facing a very good method of how we would pick this. You know, how did you get picked for the team interview? Well, you got caught in the restroom, say, hey, we got to interview somebody, come on down. Those kinds of things were happening. So then I sat on the other side of the desk, and so retired after 25 years, and so, okay, I'll be working within about 6 months, and 15 months later, I got a job. A very, very eye-opening experience for me. And interviewing was a very, very bad example. The first interview I had, I said, oh, this is terrible. I can't do this. And so I need to figure out the other side of the desk. Thought I knew it all, but I didn't quite know what I needed to know. So I got into distinctive interviewing. So today I'm going to talk to you about some things. I'm going to give you some suggestions and ideas about the things that'll differentiate ourselves from other candidates. So how do we do that? Just what it is that we do that. I'm going to talk about what we need to do in the workshop that I do, which is the Interview Success Workshop. You can find out about that on LinkedIn. Register for that. It's free and it's very informal. It is a workshop, but it's a way to say, you know, just what do I need to do to prepare for an interview? And so let me ask you this question. How much time do you spend on your resume? I bet you spent hours on it, and I don't know if you're through with it yet. I mean, it seems to sometimes be in constant redoing and adding or changing or whatever it might be, or tailoring or something like that. And how much time do you spend online and applying for, you know, jobs online, the postings process, which is interminably long and very, very slow and very, very competitive. And so we talk about networking and other ways of getting around that applicant tracking system so that we can get into that company for the position we love. And so I ask you about the time for that. Now I'm going to ask you, how much time do you spend working on your interviewing skills? How much time have you spent preparing? Do you know what content you can prepare? Do you know how, have you practiced in doing any of that? The interview is a presentation. It's a selling presentation, and we have to sell things. We need to find out what they are buying and how we can sell to what they are buying. It's the same, it's the typical thing. Many of you have done that in business for a long time. Even when you talk to customers, you're always trying to figure out their needs and how you can help them and what it is that'll specifically address their particular concerns and issues. Well, we want to do the same thing here in interviewing. So how do we do some of that? So I'll put together a little bit different perspective on interviewing today, and it comes from how do you be distinctive? How do you differentiate yourself from those other candidates? And at the same time, being genuine and authentic. So I'm going to give you some suggestions. I'd like you to filter these ideas as if you are an interviewer, not a candidate, but an interviewer, and say, as an interviewer, if I were to approach something or do something in the manner that I suggest, would that help me beat the competition? Would that stand out? Would that be more positive? Would that be something good to do? I've been doing the interview workshop now for 4 years. I celebrated the 4th year anniversary last Saturday, the 18th. So I've done quite a few, and I hear the same thing over and over and over again. And I'll tell you, it gets really tiring to hear it over and over again. We need to be different. And so how do we do that? So I'm going to talk about some of those things today. Would you agree? Things have changed. Well, the iPhone has changed the world, or the smartphone. In 1998, we were told not to get into a car with a stranger. That's, you just don't do that, And in 2008, we say, don't meet people from the internet. I mean, all this internet activity and people talking and chatting, whatever it might be. And they decided to me, so what, you shouldn't meet people from the internet alone. That's really a bad thing today. But in 2019, Uber comes along and we order a stranger from the internet to get into the car alone. So it's quite a different world. And then today, guess what? Zoom. We'd like to have had some stock in Zoom before this came along. But here we are in the video conferencing world. That was coming along anyway. It was still progressing and moving in that direction. Now it's just speeded up quite a bit. And we got a new normal today. A lot of things will now be through teleconference and this sort of thing in the future, not just interviews.
Did I get the job? Absolutely not. Why not? Because you're a baby boomer and I'm on my way. Ah, well, no.
Have said that this interview, and it also says so on this.
Start that over. I don't think, could you hear that?
Did I get the job?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because you're a baby boomer and I am a millennial.
Ah, well, Melanie, I am overqualified for this job.
I don't know where you got this. We don't do paper applications.
I made it. I don't do the internet.
Okay, that is the 3rd time you have said that this interview, and it also says so on this homemade job application.
There you go, champ.
I don't know what this is for.
Don't you need a trophy anytime you... anything?
Oh, it's on. How'd you get here? Horse?
I drove. My car. I own it. After 8 more payments.
What?
How'd you get here?
I took an Uber.
Do not know what that is. I bet you're a vegan.
Yeah, because I'm not a monster. Look at who you guys voted for.
Yeah, that's right. I voted.
Touche.
This is the only way you'll ever own a house.
Learning how to text is the only way you'll ever communicate with your son. So...
All right, guys. Who took my Sheryl Crow album?
Gen X. You know what? You're hired.
I quit.
Dad!
And so it goes.
Did I?
So let me start off with a little task that I'd like you to participate in. I'm going to create some breakout rooms and I'll give you about 5 minutes for a task. I'll give you about a 60-second countdown at the end. Let me give you 3 minutes. I'll change that to 3 and bullet 2. This is not a long task. So the first person, the spokesperson will be the person who has the earliest birth month, like January is sooner than February, March, right? And if you tie, then whatever day. So that'll be how you pick out the spokesperson. And you can return to the room at any time. If you haven't used them before, you just select, there's an option in there. You have, sometimes it may not display, you have to find it, but it says leave room, and then you say leave breakout room, and you'll come back to the meeting. And so if everybody hasn't come back by the time that, I'll give you about a minute to wrap up. So what I want you to do is to pick top 2 things that you should include in an interview to distinguish yourself in a positive way from other candidates. So it's just a simple matter of what is it that I can do. So let me find my breakout rooms control. It disappeared. And that is wonderful. Well, I give up on that. But you practice it and it still doesn't work. All right. So let me move on. I would like you to pick out one thing and enter into the chat window, one thing that you think that you must do to differentiate yourself in an interview. Something that'll be different than other candidates and will be a positive influence on the interviewer. So if you enter that in your chat window. Smiling, positive greeting, introduction, enthusiasm, company knowledge, research on that. Understand what they're trying to solve. Direct relevancy to your experience. What can you do for them? Have great questions. Comfortable and confident. Authentic. Tenacity. Be yourself. Well, looks like you passed the test. I don't have anything else to say. Everybody's got some great pieces of things here. And thank you for your input. So how do you align? How do you work with the company and align with their objectives? So today I picked out the top 10. So we're going to see if the ones that you looked at were included in my 10. The top 10 are not the only ones. There are a lot more than 10 that you can do in an interview, but I'm going to pick out the ones that I think are the most influential, and we'll discuss those today. Number 1, focus on what you want to do and achieve. It is so much easier to go in an interview knowing what you want to do, knowing what you love to do. So if you're in a position now and saying, well, I've got several options, I'm not sure which I want to approach and which one I want to aim towards, it is very hard to try to find 2 different jobs at the same time. I can do job A, I can do job B. It is a beating to do that. But if you focus on saying, this is the thing I want to do, we may as well go after the job we really enjoy, the job that's part of us, that energizes us. So what is that does that? So you may have to do some homework to go through that to figure out what those things are. But believe in yourself. Listen to your gut. Do what you love. If you haven't heard this before, and you don't know the answer to these already, does anybody know who Dylan, and I'm going to pronounce the last name, which will give you a clue, Lauren, who is she? Put it in your chat window. No idea, huh, Drake? Drake came to the workshop last Tuesday. I guess he's wanting to get a refresher here today. Sophia Loren. Oh, wouldn't you like to know that? All right. Well, Dylan Lauren is the daughter of a famous clothes designer. Anybody know his name? Ralph's daughter. Yep, somebody's got that in there. It is the daughter of Dylan. And you know what Dylan does? She runs the biggest candy store in New York City. She got the idea when she watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie when she was a child. And she started pursuing that as her dream, the thing that she wanted to do. And she has some interesting children's names. Cooper, I can't remember the names now. I forgot them all of a sudden, but she's a very, very interesting person. And so you have to look up the candy store. And what can you imagine what it costs to rent space in New York City for a candy store, and is well known for that. So very, very interesting person, but that's what she loves to do. So sometimes I look at people and I look at sayings and I says, you know, I look at the saying, I don't look at the person. Who said it may not be the big deal to me. It doesn't really matter who said it. Does it really make sense? Is that something that is worthwhile to know and understand? So number 2, positive attitude and enthusiasm. Who can tell me what that hand sign in the middle of that picture is? What does it mean? Put it in your chat window. Hook 'em horns. I knew that was going to come up here in Texas. So that is one definition. But the worldwide definition would be, I'm feeling good. I'm happy. Things are going well. That's what that sign means. And so your positive attitude and enthusiasm. So I'm going to ask you this question. In your chat window, tell me, what % do you think of the decision made to hire somebody is based on enthusiasm for the job and the company? Their interest, their energy towards it, their passion towards it, how they talk about it, how they speak about it. What %? 80, 80, 90, 75, 75, 80, 90, 70, 90. So I believe that you're answering it from the interviewer's perspective. So if a candidate comes to me and shows that energy and passion and interest for the job, that's going to go a long way. In fact, you're telling me you're over halfway. In fact, you're telling me that you're over halfway home just by doing that. Now, it has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. But having that positive attitude towards things. So let me ask you something about attitude. Do you like dogs? Who likes dogs? Say, you know, you can do your raise your hand, yes or no. Or you can put it in the chat window. You know, some people like dogs and some people, you know, they don't really care for dogs, all right? Now, while I call dogs one of the mysteries of the universe, why is there an animal that's so devoted to humans is just beyond me. I don't understand that. Squirrels don't do it. Cats kind of do it, but I don't understand that. But let me ask you, if you like dogs or you don't like dogs, why is it that you don't like them? Is it the dog's fault? The dog is just being a dog. It's your attitude towards the dog that makes the difference. And so you choose the attitude, whether you like it or you don't like it, but it's your choice. It's not the dog's fault that you don't like them or not the dog's fault that you like them. It's how you react to the dog. You believe that 46% of new hires fail within 18 months? That's a very, very alarming statistic. And 41% fail from their attitude rather than the skills. We are hiring people that can do the job, but there's something else going on behind the scenes that's causing this job not to be successful. And it can be this hiring for attitude survey came out and said 41%, almost half, fail from their attitude. So if you're picking the job that you can do, but your attitude isn't positive towards doing that job, so is it, and give an example. It's okay, here's the job I can do. I need money, I gotta get a job. I gotta do something here. I can't get my dream job. I gotta do something, so I'm gonna get this job. All right, what's your attitude towards it? Is it a stepping stone to your next job that you can get later? Is it something you say, I will use this time to learn and benefit from what I do in this job to help me as I want to move forward in my career? Now, I'm a Vietnam veteran, so I'm just going over to Vietnam, and I'm I'm in the airplane. I said, you know, this would be good for me. It's like in 1969. I remember listening to us land on the moon and stand up on the moon with my little hanging radio from my M151, which is a Jeep, at night, one night. But I was saying, oh, you know, this would be good for me. I'll learn a new culture. I'll understand things that I haven't understood before. I'll appreciate things that I haven't seen, you know, haven't experienced, you know, that I have back home that I don't, you know, don't have here. So it'll make me more appreciative. And I think I'll grow up a little bit, and this will be a good experience for me. So that night we got hit, and I spent the whole night in the bunker. Walk out the next morning and say, you know, I've learned a lot. I really see a new culture. I've experienced everything. I'm ready to go home. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know anything else. So your attitude, what is your attitude towards? So I was trying to put a positive attitude on my experience that was going to be in Vietnam as that example. So Abe says it best, I think. We're about as happy as we make up our minds to be. If you depend on external factors to make you happy, you're not going to be happy very much, and you won't be happy very long. It comes from within. And so that's what we want to represent in our interviews. So Dale Carnegie says, you know, if you don't have a lot of fun in what you're doing, you don't have a good chance of succeeding. So we want to find that job that gives us that energy. We want to have fun. We want to find that culture that says this is a great place to work. Brian Carlson thought he knew what he wanted to do. He stepped back after a while and says, I don't know. He assessed his own self. He was a client of Jack Bick's, if you know Jack Bick, who's a career coach. And he went through that process. You know, I really want to do something different. And he found a job in a smaller company, great people, great things. And he was overjoyed at his conclusion of his job search of what he found and where he was working. And it was because he found energy and enthusiasm in the culture and the product and the service that that company offered. That's what we want to look for. So we got to be authentic, we got to be genuine. All right, we've already talked about that percentage. All right, positive attitude, enthusiasm. I'm going to quote George Wright. I was out fishing around on the internet, and I found him, and they had an interview with him, and he was talking about hiring people. So I'm going to quote him a few times throughout this because I think what his perspective is as an interviewer is right on target with what we should be paying attention to as candidates. So we assess people by first impressions. So how you look and speak matters. So Princeton did research. This is fantastic. You know, we kind of know this happens, but listen to this or look at this. We make judgments. Things trustworthiness, confidence, likability, and you want to kind of sum up likability as the who you are approach within a fraction of a second after seeing your face. In fact, trustworthiness is in 1/10 of a second. Now, we don't recognize and realize that we're probably doing that, but isn't it true that when we see somebody, there's some judgment we make about them? There's some decision we make? Now, we don't sit there and look at them and say, well, you're not very trustworthy, but there are parameters and things that we already put onto somebody just based on their looks alone. I remember a person that was a wife of a person in our church, and when I first saw her, she wasn't very pretty. But when I got to know her and the personality that she had and the joy that she brought and gave, she was a beautiful woman. And it was all due to how she acted, how she behaved. It wasn't how she looked so much. But my first impression was really bad. It was really way off. So I learned that lesson. So you know, don't judge the book by its cover and all that sort of thing. But we're going to do that. So it's important for us that we've got to set something in that first part of our meeting. When the first time they see us, we want to do something different than what the regular or the normal or typical candidate does. So we want to figure out how can we make that first impression be a very, very positive thing. So let's go to the greeting. Which picture stands out? Put it in the chat window. Anyone out there? The baby, all the smiling. You like Julia Roberts? Baby. Bottom male. okay? But there's a secret about smiling. We probably kind of feel this, but here's the real thing that's going on. Who can look at that picture of a baby, or any baby, when you look at it and they smile and you not feel good? I mean, that is rare if you don't. I mean, when you see a smiling baby like that, you feel good. There's something physical going on in your body to react to that smile that makes you feel good. And when you smile, it actually happens for you and it happens for the recipient. And the recipient will generally smile coming back. So smiling is a very key thing to do. And I see a lot of interviewers, they'll smile at the introduction and at the beginning, and then I never see it again. It's gone. Well, it's something that's within you that makes you smile. I can't wait to talk to this interviewer. I can't wait to meet them. I can't wait to have a conversation about what's the job and the company and what's happening, how I can help them. I'm looking forward to this. I'm energized by this meeting and this conversation that I hope that we can have to go with that. Then you'll smile. It comes from the result of your thinking. It comes from the result of your attitude. It comes as a result of your enthusiasm and energy, your interest, all that sort of thing. So when you have that, this stuff's really easy to do. It comes out right normally for you. So smiling is extremely important, particularly when you start off in the meeting. So if you walk into the meeting and you're saying, please God, help me answer these questions. You have fear, you have anxiety, you just want to get this thing over with, and you want to interview, answer the questions, get out and hope they choose you, good luck. I don't think that's a very good methodology for getting a job. So building that confidence, and guess why you build confidence? You practice. You practice. You take advantage of the pit crew and go through the mock interview process. You come to these kinds of sessions that I'm holding today to learn what you have to do. But I see a lot of people learning what, but I don't see a whole lot of people practicing it and going through that process. And so I really encourage people to practice. So that greeting is very important. So here's what George says. I look for people who are passionate about what they're doing, excited about the experience. I come to play here. Look for someone who has energy. All those things indicate a person who wants to get a job done. So let's analyze this for a moment, okay? I'm looking for passionate about what they're doing. Do you love your job? Do you enjoy doing what you do? If you are an accountant, do you love spreadsheets or not? I mean, you gotta love them. You gotta enjoy them. You like to do the what ifs. You like to do all the different tables and the things that you can do in Excel to find out and help gather that information and that data so that you can help people make good decisions, right? All right, so they're passionate. They're excited about their experience. So when you talk about what you've done and you're responding something, is there any energy in it? I remember one day at the pit crew, we were interviewing someone, and he was asked one of these behavioral interview questions, this STAR story type thing, if you've heard of STAR stories, situation, task, action, result. And I said, tell me about a time when so-and-so and so-and-so. And he smiled and said, oh, that was a fun one. And then he told the story of the event, and he was smiling throughout, and he was showing his enjoyment of that particular event and that experience. When the interview ended and the feedback was given from the 3 panel interviewers, they all said that was the most significant thing that they remembered out of the whole interview. That was a fun one, and the way he told that story made a huge, huge difference. Still have to be authentic, still have to be genuine, all right? So, but you gotta know, is this story relevant to the job? So you've heard this before, is your experience and your activity relevant to the position you're looking for? I see a lot of resumes from people who are extremely experienced. I saw one this week, and he had some rows and boxes and columns of background experience and skills. There was 21 listed items on the resume. And I looked at it and I said, gotta be careful of the position you're looking for because you're overqualified. You can do so many things. You're overqualified. I wonder what the job description looks like and how you could tailor that list down to maybe half a dozen that would be matching that job description and tailor that resume for that, so that you say, okay, here's the experience that's relevant to the job. So how does it come to play here? So everything has to be relevant to what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody who has energy, okay? You may not have to jump up on the table and dance. I use that expression a lot, but you have to show interest. You have to show something that says, this is the position I want, this is where I want to work. And you do it in the way, in the tone of voice, and how you answer those questions. And then what does all that mean? He says, because it means to me, this is a person who gets a job done. That's what those things mean to that person. That's the value of the passion, the excitement, and the relevance, the energy, that sort of thing. That's why I look for it, because it results in this kind of thing. So the soft skill has a value to it because of what the result is. Any questions as we go along, just jump in. All right, Joseph. Joseph got a job at Raytheon, and he asked the manager and the director of the group for feedback on his interview. I'm sure that this was at the pit crew, I think. I'm sure Mark remembers Joseph. And so this is after he was hired, and they said, I was the only candidate that really showed any enthusiasm for the job. That's a huge statement. Think about that. We walk into an interview and show that we can do the job. We've done the job. We're doing that. Why should I hire you? Because my background and skills fit the job, just like all the rest of the candidates. And it's boring, and it's the same answer. And it's not the reason we hire you. We've already brought you in here because you've already fit that. We believe you can do the job. So don't emphasize that. You got to include it. But that's not what you emphasize. You emphasize who you are and how you can help. So there's I am, I do, I help. And we don't want to just talk about I do. So sell your soft skills. Does it fit the culture? Sell what you can do for them. Number 3, knowledge. Company, industry, competition, customers. Do your research on your company. Jared targeted Lockheed for a year. He came to the pit crew, came to the workshop 3 or 4 times, 5 times. He went through the interview process at pit crew 5 or 6 times, and he got a job on at Lockheed. But if you ask Jared, what do you know about the company? I mean, stand back. I'm sure that Jeff remembers Jared because he was on one of the panel interviews for him. And he will blow you away about his knowledge about what's going on at Lockheed. And with energy and enthusiasm and passion and his desire to want to work there. And it paid off. And so he did accept a position as a buyer at Lockheed. So your knowledge is going to be extremely important. So here's George again. Let's analyze this particular sentence. If you're going to interview, you better know something about the company. You have to understand about the objective of the position. Now, what's an objective of the position? It's the result of what you do. It's how you can help. That's the objective. Every job has a purpose. It's not what you do that's so important. It's the result of what you do. All right? And if we don't sell our results and we don't sell our achievements and we don't sell how we can help them, we're missing the boat. We can really differentiate ourselves because not very many people do that. Find out how that company perceives the position. Do it before the interview. That's through your research, through your informational interviews. Do it then when you come in, and then you do it some more in the interview. Get the perspective of that particular interviewer on how they see you in this particular role and what you can do for them. So you want to address what they're looking for. What a novel idea. Why don't we find out what they're looking for so that we can address it? That's what salespeople do. We're in this selling situation. All we got to do is ask them a few questions and say, what are you looking for? How can I be successful in this role? What do you expect for me to do and accomplish for you? And they tell you, they say, well, let's talk about those things. And you can demonstrate how you've done that before. You use your star stories. It's a nice conversation. It's a very, very different interview. Where do you get this knowledge? All over. Lots of places. You know, I mentioned Reference USA because it is a good place to find target companies. A to Z is not listed here, but A, T, zero, not zero, T-O-Z is a database similar to Reference USA. Go to your library. They have a lot of access to databases, including those two. They can help you find companies. It's got a lot of parameters you can search on. Then you can start vetting those companies and saying, this sounds like the right kind of company. I mean, you need a list of saying, this is the job I want. This is the type of company that I want. This is the type of industry that I want. This is the kind of culture that I'm looking for. This is the things that I can probably achieve. This is where I want to go. You have to have all these things planned out in advance because you want to find out those things during all this process of getting a job. And so you find those potential companies, then you start networking in and finding out. You have your interviews, you look them up, you research, et cetera, like that. Yes, this is a place I want to be. And when you find the place you want to be, your interviewing is going to be easier because you are energized and excited about being in this company. It's just not something you found and you looked at and you say, gee, what is it about this company? So target companies are not defined by going and finding a job posting, seeing what the company is and making that a target company. That's not the way you do it. Now you might find one that way. I'm not saying you don't do it that way, but I'll tell you what, if you spend more time trying to be found than you do being found, there's a difference between finding and being found. And if all your time is spent on trying to be found, it's a longer job search. It's a much, much longer job search. Let's take Toyota logo, for example. I looked up Toyota. I mean, if you look at that logo, I mean, it's very interesting how the shading is, and it's brighter in some and kind of rings around rings. And I said, well, I want to find out something I can find out about Toyota. So, okay, that represents the steering wheel. By the way, it took them 5 years to develop this. This is the T for Toyota, those two circles. And then the inside, those gaps, it's the overlap between the customer, the company, and the technological progress for a mutually beneficial relationship. That space is for the infinite values. I put them out in here as to what they're looking for. So I know a lot about this company, and I can talk a lot about this company, and I can ask questions about this company with this information that's given just in doing the research on their logo. Look up other companies' logos, see what they mean. They're always sending a message. This is a symbol of their company. It's critical and it's important. So when I found out that people associate the logo with the cars of exceptional quality. So I already went through all of those. And that's what they're really trying to say. When you see Toyota, you think quality, all right? Number 4, speaking in their frame of reference. We often answer in our frame of reference, all right? But we want to stay on their agenda. So there's a way you can sometimes control the interview by asking questions about the things you need to know about, for example, but you still want to stay on their agenda. Example, what do you look for in a new job? I look for challenge. I look for opportunity for growth. I look for some potential training. I look for teamwork. Okay, what's wrong with that answer? Nothing. It's a good answer. It's not a bad answer. That's okay. But what if you change that answer to say, I love turning customers around. I enjoy when I close a sale and I can increase revenue. I look for processes that we can evaluate and improve and save money. Okay, now I'm talking the I help side. I'm talking about the results of what I do, which is the reason they're hiring you. If we can sell that piece of it, not just the personal side of it and how we look at it, sell both. It's okay to sell both, but we're not selling that often. We're not selling about what they're looking for and from their frame of reference. Here's another one. Good old George. Let's analyze this sentence. So I ask a question, did you think about it? This is a huge thing. You might not believe it, but it is. We have something inside of us that says if we don't answer quickly, that's bad. You're the interviewer. What would you rather have? A candidate starts talking and finally gets to the answer because they're talking, because they don't like silence, it works against them, and they got to figure out an answer, so they're blabbing, or the person that just stops, thinks, and then gives an answer that's very specific to the question. And why? I want to know how well they listen and can they respond in clear, concise terms. This is an example of our communication skills. The solution is called the pause. Those of you that know me for very well, I can't speak too much without speaking about the pause. Pause and think. Pause. Take a breath, not a sigh, a breath, and say, all right, let me think about this for a moment. If you need to think a little bit longer, buy another pause. I got to think about this for a moment. One of the interviews at the pit crew was a person was asked a fairly complex question. He says, can you give me some time to think about that? And he took out a piece of paper and a pencil and he started writing down. He wrote down about a half a dozen elements and pieces of this. So he took, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute to write all those things down. And then he looked up and then he gave a really great answer. But he stopped, collected all of his thoughts. And we all were very, very appreciative. And that person stood out as, let me think and let me answer this thing and do it in a really good way. It was a very good example of what I'm talking about. So your opening is very important. Now we have 13 sessions that's recorded out there that we've been doing on Wednesday between Mark and myself. So a lot of the how to do this is all in those 13 sessions. So I'm going to just go over some briefly. But here's a suggestion for this. Once you get into the first question, whatever it is, you get to try to make a statement. And so what if you could explain to them how you got into your career in 2 sentences that shows, I love what I do. I enjoy doing this. What was it the person said? The construction said, I've been in construction ever since I built a doghouse when I was 7 years old. Another person, I asked a photographer, why are you a photographer? And he said, my dad took a picture of me years ago with a Kodak camera and he pulled out the film and he peeled it back and he waved it in the air and he showed me the picture and I went, wow, look at what you captured. He's not a photographer. He captures moments. That's what he does. All right. So that's the big difference. What's your experience and what is your soft skills and how do they add value? So with my experience in this and my teamwork, ability, negotiation, whatever it might be that's relevant to that position, I can help you do these things. I can help you achieve those things. I can also give you stories down through the interview to demonstrate those things. I'm going to tell them why I left my last position or leaving. Today, it's like Mark said, if it's simple, you know, I left, furloughed, COVID-19, that's the end of it. Everybody understands that. You don't have to go into any more detail, all right? But you run right into answering this question, why do you want for us with the company? So I really want this job because of what? And I want to work here for this company, why? Right? And that's a good way to approach people who think you're overqualified. Just convince them that this is the job you want and this is the place you want to do it. And it doesn't matter that you've done all of these other things. I've seen people, I ask them, you think you're overqualified? No, I don't think so. Well, they do. You've already started an argument with them, right? If they didn't think you were overqualified, they wouldn't ask the question. So you tell them no, so you're telling them they're wrong. That's not a very good technique. So those are some of the things we do in the workshop. Then you state your job focus. Particularly, I'm interested in whatever job they've got, whatever is the aim. And then you ask a question for 2 reasons. To get into a conversation, because you want it conversational. And 2, like I was telling you earlier, we got to find out what they're buying. So there's 2 things that you want to ask relatively soon in the beginning of the interview. One question should always be asked at the end of the response to their first question. You can pick either one of these, but I like both of these early on. I want to know the soft skills they're looking for. I want to know the results they want. How can I help you? So I ask some question along those lines. So what can I do for you the next 9 months for you to say I've done an outstanding job? What are the expectations in this role? What are the top 3 criteria in my performance review? Ask these questions to find out what they're looking for. So you say, well, which one of those would you like to talk about first? Then you get into a conversation to start describing how you can help them achieve those kinds of things. What are the top 3 characteristics of the person who is successful in this role? What are the 3? I saw several in the job description, but what do you think the top 3 are? Where are they? And can you demonstrate in some of your achievements in your events how you use those soft skills to achieve success in that particular action? So conversational interviewing, number 6. I've already kind of alluded to this. Conversational interview is a lot better than interrogation. you may not be successful at establishing the conversation. That first question is sure big help in getting there. They may say, well, at the end, you can talk at the end. But what happens if you hold your questions at the end? You can't talk about them. You can't have a discussion. You can't have conversations about them. All you can do is just get some data. So talk to each other, right? Traditional, we go in and they ask questions, we answer questions, and we hope they choose us. How successful do you think that model is? You like waiting by the phone? You like wondering if they're going to call you or not? And then you keep saying, well, they ghost me. They don't tell me anything. Well, look at them from their perspective. You think they got time to tell all the candidates that they didn't make it? That they're going to call them up and tell them you didn't make it? No, that kind of activity doesn't earn a recruiter any money whatsoever. So they don't. So we got to change that. And there's ways to do that. So what we can do is the strategic model is that they have some needs. Let's find out what those needs are, right? We've got skills and we can demonstrate our accomplishments by those things. We have a discussion about those things. We both ask questions, we both answer questions, and we have the responsibility for the outcome. So let's not walk into the interview saying, I hope you choose me. Let's walk in saying, I'm gonna make them an offer they can't refuse. I'm gonna show the value I bring. I'm gonna show you the personality I bring. I'm gonna show the fit, all right? And if you do a good job of selling who you are, what you do, and how you can help, and they don't want that, that's okay. Because you wouldn't be successful there anyway. So the definition of a successful interview is doing just what I just said, not getting hired. You need to find out whether you want to work there, right? This may not be the place you want to work. Questions that you ask. I'll tell you what, I see a lot of people that just don't ask questions in an interview. And this is critical to ask questions. What's your criteria for getting a job in this company? What things do you want? Here's the list, all right? Okay, I want a company that has these kinds of values. Maybe they have this kind of service, this kind of product. What all is that? Okay, let me prepare my prioritized list of questions to say, let me find these things out, all right? And so there's kind of the questions about finding out what they want, what they're buying, what you can sell to. But you also want to find out, is this the place for me? So what are those questions and how do you prioritize? Because you probably won't get to ask them all. Here's what George says. Do you have any questions? He wants to see how insightful they are and what's important to them. Therefore, you'll be graded on your questions. You want an interviewer to say you ask good questions. The definition of good is simply you're asking the kind of questions to get the kind of information that you know so that you understand the expectations of this role, you understand what the culture is like, you understand what the fit would be, and you're covered, you got all the bases covered. Those are great questions that you ask. So let me give you a little word about them. So what do you need to know to make a decision? Get your prioritized list. Don't wait until the end, and do a mix. Now here's my mix suggestion. There's a generic questions. What's your culture like? What do you like about the company? Do you have a marketing plan? I mean, there's just getting some information, all right? There's another kind that says I lead those questions with knowledge about the company. This is how I can demonstrate my knowledge. I said, I was listening to your quarterly earnings report. There was a section on your webpage where I could go look at your earnings report, and I saw the video on it. And the CEO was saying, we've got to develop more products with a higher margin. Tell me, what's happening and what's the plans and what's looking like what we need to do going forward to accomplish that? And guess what my job is? Product development, all right? I'm asking questions in areas where I can help. I'm finding out what's going on. Is this the place I want to work? And can I do things for them? And get into a conversation about that. 200 questions job, you may ask. Now you can search on that, but let me just stop right briefly and let's see here. Okay, I just sent you that file in the chat window, so you don't have to look it up. But it's questions that are written to interviewers to say, what type of questions might candidate ask? It's a little bit different perspective. And the 64 toughest questions of that document, if you haven't seen that, you can look it up. That's a popular one too. Gives you some ideas about answering questions. Number 7, experience and value relevant to the job. The experience has value, but the value is really coming from what have you achieved with that experience. This is where your situation, task, action, result, STAR stories. There's a whole session given on STAR stories, one of the 13 that are out there recorded. Jeff will probably talk about them at the end, where you can access these. But how to use a story in a nice, clear, concise structure and terms to start with brevity, let them ask for more details that's really relevant to that job. So we want to demonstrate every time we talk about our experience, we want to talk about what did that experience do for them. Very important. So situation, task, action, result. When I was, give me a title. Here's the task or the challenge. Now I'm used 2 to 3 sentences for the S and the T. That's how you start with brevity. You don't need a big, long discussion about that. So what I did was, step A, step B, step C. Here's what I did. Here was the process I went through. Here's the people that I involved, and as a result, if you can tie it to dollars, that's great. Numbers are next, percentage next, and value is next. And so look up that session on STAR stories for more details about that. It's a powerful, powerful tool. And one of the most beautiful things about the STAR story is that that's how you make a connection and build rapport with your interviewers, because they will live that story with you. Very, very important. Soft skills relevant to the job, right? They are really the selling skills, right? If you don't have likability and you don't have culture fit and you don't have some same set of values and stuff like that, the rest of it doesn't matter. If they don't like you, if they don't, if you're not talking like the way that they operate, and you're talking about ways you can help them, things like that, and they don't like it, you're dead. It's over. So try to find those things out before you get into the interview, and then validate those in the interview. Lots of assessments out there and things that you can find out to do that. Here's what George says. Are they technically qualified? Then over to the soft skills. You can have all that credentials, but if they don't match it, you run into problems. So think value of the skill. So in your STAR stories, take the soft skills that you use. And so collaboration may be really evident in there. Or your training ability to, maybe you train someone to accomplish something, whatever it might be. So what are those soft skills? And bring those out in the story. You can just come up with your library of stories and then assign some of the soft skills so that you have a soft skill story as well as an accomplishment. So if you want to talk about a particular soft skill, you can give a story about that. What you've done with them is of greater value. I'm gonna give you a very short thing on Strengths Finder, and it's called Clifton Strengths now. I've got to change this slide, they've changed. Here are my 5 strengths. A lot of people use these. I just want to warn you about some of these words. But take, for example, responsibility, all right? By the way, I put them in a BPRAC because I'm a very practical person. So let's take a responsibility. So here's what I can say about responsibility. Well, I take ownership of what I say and do, and you add integrity, trustworthiness, and dependability. You can rely on me. There's the value of responsibility. You can rely on me. You give me a task, I'll take care of it. I had a job where we had to train 10,000 caseworkers across the state of Florida. And when it was done, and I was responsible for getting a lot of that done, my manager came to me and says, I worried about the wrong thing. This was the thing that I was scared about the most. And I worried about, it. So the best thing I ever did was put you in that role because you made that happen. So that's a nice comment to have. So be careful of using these terms because they are not obvious as to what they mean. So if you use those, you can't expect people to understand what a woo is. You don't know what individualization means. You might think it means something, but they're kind of weird. So just pay attention to that. Number 9, what can we do for them? We talked about this a little bit earlier. It doesn't matter what you can do. It matters what you can do for them. That's what really matters. So how can I help you? That's what the clerk says in the store. That's what the car salesman says. What are you looking for? He doesn't come out and say, you want to buy a truck? So we shouldn't go in and start selling a truck because they might want an SUV. What is it the job description is not dependable. They're not all that well written. It's a good start, perhaps. But I've heard the story when I said, how'd the interview go? And the person said, well, they changed the job description. It's not what they're looking for. But it's a starting point. But let's find out what those things are. And then lastly, the close. I tell you, we don't close sales. I see it time after time after time. What do I hear? Thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I look forward to hearing from you soon. And I get up and leave. All right? Terrible. F. No grade whatsoever. That is not what salespeople do. They don't come out and tell you benefits and features. And the car salesman says, well, it's been great showing you these cars. I'm going back now, have a cup of coffee. I'll hope to hear from you soon. That's not what we do, but that's what we do in interviews. So here's a little kind of how to show interest in your job. I just want to summarize some things. I really love this job. I like this company. All right. I'm going to show them, we've talked today about you need somebody who can help you achieve these things. Let's summarize the value that we bring. Find out where you stand. There's several ways that you can do that, depending on who you're talking to. There's several techniques for that. Make sure you know that total process for hiring. All right, and update it as you go along. Figure out what's going on. You ought to know what has to happen in that company to get on board. Find out what that is. What's their schedule? What are their expectations to accomplish that? Find out the names of those interviewers. The next step, what is specific? You don't want to just know the next step. You want to know when is the next step. When will I hear back from you? Who's going to call me back? Who's going to inform me? Find out from that. Okay, it'll be this person. And then say, okay, if I don't hear from you by that date, can I call you on the next day? So, set the time frame. People say, I don't know when to call them back. Why don't you ask? Find out. It's just simple. Just ask. Find out what it is. Who do I call for questions? They may tell you to send emails, but you want to have questions. You want to stay top of mind. People say, I don't know when to contact them. Well, okay. You talked about this in the interview, so you send them an email. So, we discussed this. I have some ideas that I'd like to share with you. I'd be interested in hearing from you about that. Or you said, we talked about this. If I didn't hear from you by this date, then I could contact you. So I was really excited about what we said in the interview. Give them a nice compliment about something they did. And say, if I don't hear back from you, because you get their voicemail and not the person, say, if I don't hear back from you, I will call you on this date. And you reset the date. Who's in charge of your job search? You or them? Let's us be in charge. Let's find out those things. Let's us do that. And it's not going to hurt you in the interview. And then, farewell. Now we have to nod. Okay, we can't shake hands. We got to nod. All right, that's the goodbye or something. But I'm excited about the coming because I can't wait to get started. All genuine and authentic. Should you practice today? Of course. Of course you should. I'll run out of time, but here are the top 10. So several of you mentioned things that are included in this top 10 list. So I'm really excited to see that a lot of people see some of the things that they need to do in an interview to differentiate themselves. I'll spend a little time for questions now.
Questions. If you got them, you can unmute your mic or put them in the chat box and we'll get them answered for you.
That's the fastest I've ever talked.
Great information. Could you go into a little bit more? Let me turn me on. Great amount of information. Could you take a second and just kind of go a little bit more into when you were talking about the setting up the conversation? How do you try to keep that off on asking someone a conversation about the company and they really, really don't know as you're trying to peel the onion? Because I usually, if I'm being interviewed, they'll ask the question, I will answer the question, and at the end of my answer, I check for clarity, and before they probably get the next word out, I will ask them a question that evolves from that answer. Is that an issue that you're having here? Because they'll say, tell me about a time when, and then to get that going. But I don't want to feel like I'm pressuring them and that they're being interviewed, which they are, but I don't want them to start sweating because the only one needs to sweat is me. But you understand where I'm coming from? on what's that,
Yes.
that fine balance.
Yes, the reactionary question is excellent. Okay, you don't ask reactionary questions after any negative question. All right, you don't want to follow up any negatives with a question, and just a general rule. You also don't know how much time you have, so because you can't ask too many questions, and you don't want to be doing all, letting them do all the talking. So it's like a 70-30 type balance where you need to talk about 70% and they need to talk about 30. But sometimes, these things change based on who your interviewer is. But it's very appropriate that after they ask you a question, they would say, well, tell me about a time you had a difficult customer. So you tell them about that story. And you say, how would you describe your customers? All right? What it might be facing. Don't you think that they're telegraphing a need by their question? If they didn't have any difficult customers, why would they ask the question? It probably wouldn't occur to them. And so that would be a good thing to ask, but you got to kind of pace it. Know how much time. So at the beginning of the interview, how much time do we have today? It may be scheduled for an hour, but it may not be. It may have changed. It can only be 30 minutes. So you want to ask a few questions, but that first question after the first response is your attempt to get into that conversation. And they may shut you down, so you get to ask some questions at the end of the interview, okay? Or you can get at least that, and you can say, which one would you like to talk about first? And then they may ask another question or something about, maybe it's related to their response, maybe it's not. But yeah, the reactionary question is fine. Just don't overdo it, all right? Don't make you the interviewer in the process. That's why you prioritize your questions. So you're finding out the most important things you need to find out as soon as you can. Does that help?
Walt, on Facebook, Sanju's asking, how do you know that your star story is deep enough for your experience?
That the experience is deep enough, relevant to the job? Is that the question?
Yeah. How do you know your star story is deep enough for your experience? I guess,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to guess what deep enough means. So let me answer it this way. Relevant. Number one, it's got to be relevant to their job. All right. So when you pick the story, make sure it's relevant. So tell me about your past accomplishment. Well, when I went to college and I went through and I saved money and I worked and everything and graduated from college was my greatest achievement. Well, that's a great achievement and that's something great, but it's not relevant to the position. So first make it relevant. So when you say depth of experience, it's saying if they're talking about a particular area, you can talk about your experience and the result. And so if you've got a great result, that depth doesn't matter. It's not an issue about that. So the question is it relevant and do you have a good result? A lot of people will say, so we got everybody together and it worked out well. And that's the end of the story. we all pitched in and helped and we made it. One guy was giving a story.
all right, Solomon, we'll get to your question in just a second. One more question from Facebook. Diane asks, suggestions for any adaptations for a digital interview? Tough when there's no opportunity for interaction. Smiley face.
Guess you'll have to listen to my presentation on video interviewing. Well, you still have an opportunity, even though it's video, to ask a question. So I'm not sure what the difference you're asking about on video versus face-to-face that would make any difference in that. Maybe I don't understand the question.
Yeah, suggestions for any adaptations for a digital interview. It's what we're doing right now.
Okay.
You want to make sure, it's just preparing,
I think the question is about an interview bot.
Yes, Mark?
What?
Question is about an interview bot.
Oh, interview
Robot.
bots. I don't know.
Mark, you got suggestions? I'm not sure what the question is.
Yeah, I think the question is about one-way interviews, right? So you have
Okay.
you have a automated program. Some companies are now doing these interviews which aren't interactive.
This is the part that you have to practice. You've got to practice. You can be looking into a camera anyway. Most PCs have a camera. They will record. Your phone will record. practice the star story, do that, practice doing that sort of thing so that you feel comfortable doing that. HireVue is a company that's beginning to use artificial intelligence, and it's the upgrade to the applicant tracking system. So they have a database of people and employees that they've interviewed and talked, and they put it in their database, and then you come up and then nobody talks to you. They have the questions, you answer the questions, and your artificial intelligence looks at your keywords, all the words you say. It listens to the tone of your voice and how you say it, and it analyzes your body language and facial expressions. And that's how they decide whether you get to the next step or not. So a lot of this stuff is being automated. When you ask a person, part of the process for hiring is what's their style of interviewing? How do they do that? Some will say, well, we're typically behavioral interviewing. Texas Health Resources is very famous for that. So you're going to get all questions about, tell me about a time when, give me an example of. So you have to practice talking to that camera as if you're talking to someone and showing that energy enthusiasm. It's not natural. So you got to practice that.
Let me add a little bit to that though, because the questions you would ask if you had an interviewer on the other side can still be asked. You can say, if we were interactive, I'd be curious to know. I'd be interested to hear. And so that's how you express your enthusiasm and get the question in, even though you're not going to get an answer.
Right. Solomon, you want to ask your question? Or I can read it for you. Oh, he's on the phone. Okay, I'll ask it for him while he's asking. So Solomon asked on Star Stories, what do you think about starting with the result, then asking if they'd like to hear more about it, to then go into the situation, the tactics, etc. Do you think one is better than the other for creating a conversation?
Well, the answer to that is, depends on who you ask, because everybody's got their way of doing it. All right. And so here's my way of doing it. All right. Number one, if they're not asking you to tell a story and not asking you for any of them, it would be great to say, would you like me to tell you about a time when and you give the R. So I will always want to give the R first in that scenario when they're not asking. Now, when they ask you for a story, what happened is kind of the suspense of the story. And if you tell it up front, I don't think it has quite the same impact as if waiting until the end. Will it make a difference whether you're hired or not? I don't think so. I don't think it's that big a factor. Some people have SARS and rats and all other kinds of things that they use about how you tell it, and so this is the way you should tell it. Well, most of the people that say this is the way you should tell it is the way they want you to tell it. All right, that's what it means. And in fact, that's what I'm doing. It's the way I like to hear Star Stories. This is my opinion. But always use an R if they're not telling you. So yeah, would you like me to tell you about a time when I did this? I would put one of those in the opening. That's part of the value statement of what you did. With my experience in this, I've been able to accomplish this. For example, and then you give an R. And then later on, they won't say, well, we want to know more about that. So it's bait. So yes, that's a good time to give R's up front.
Ellen Beth asked, what advice do you have for a panel interview?
Find out where they live. There's some basic tips for a panel interview, some basic mistakes. Now, there's a session we give on implosion of interviews and mistakes and things like that. And this is one of the things we talk about in that session. The most common mistake, what do you think the most common mistake that's made in a panel interview? It's directing the answer towards the person who asked the question only and not looking at the other people on the panel. So you want to, anytime a question is asked, you want to take a couple sentences here, then you want to answer to everybody, all right? Another mistake that's made is sometimes you give a compliment to one of the interviewers, and the other people say, well, I didn't get a compliment. So yeah, that's a good question. I hate that phrase, that's a good question. I hate it because most of the time it's a phrase used to give me time to think of an answer. But if it really is a good question, I would really prefer you say, yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I think that's very important and critical in this role. Give them a compliment about asking that question. So with a panel interview, it's a little tougher to build rapport and to build some commonality between you. But Find out. Let them do some talking. I would ask a question and say, I would like each of you to tell me your thoughts on, and then you get an answer from maybe each one of them on that perspective so that they can share that. I had an interview where at the end of it, they said, you know, we're supposed to evaluate you. We'd like you to evaluate us. What do you think? How would you describe us? And so I went through it and I talked, you know, about each person. And so I could see they were kind of impressed with what I said because I was paying attention and listening and seeing what kind of questions each one asked, and it came back and to really describe them.
Okay. One more question. Tony asked, any suggestions if you start to feel nervous, particularly at the beginning of an interview?
Practice beforehand so you don't feel nervous. I mean, it really takes some confidence because, you know, when you walk in, I want you to walk in and say, go ahead, ask me the salary question. I'm ready. I've done my homework. I'm prepared. Go ahead. Ask me the overqualified thing. I'm ready. All right. Yeah, I've got my opening. Yeah, I know how to answer some negative questions. Yeah, I'm ready for that. I've got some stories. I'm ready for that. I'm excited. You know, if you do your preparation and your practice ahead, that's the confidence builder. And when you walk in, you don't have to worry about those things. If you start to feel nervous, though, pause and take a breath. Okay? Breathing is going to relax you. It's going to clear your mind. It's going to help your body focus. So if you get caught in that situation, a direct answer would be pause, take a breath, think about what they asked. Here's a clue. Many people start answering a question before it's even finished. All right? So how do you stop from doing that? You listen to the question and you pause and you repeat the question in your mind, forcing you to listen to the question. Then you start thinking of your answer. So there's a technique to say, am I listening? Do something that helps your listening ability.
All right. One more question came in from on Facebook from Jose, and I guess this is primarily, I'm going to direct this to Mark just because I know this is his wheelhouse. How do you tactfully address an involuntary departure from a previous job?
Go, Mark.
To
Unmute.
tactfully address an involuntary. Well, every situation is unique, okay? And especially if you've been involuntarily terminated or if you think you've been involuntarily terminated. So in my coaching career, you know, probably 3/4 of the people who approach me think they were fired, and you know, out of 150, probably 2 actually were for cause. And you know, it wasn't a mystery to them. They knew exactly why they got fired and what caused it. But you know, they're still searching for a way to tell the story. So you learned a lot and you contributed a lot. That's a key phrase that I teach people to say. You know, thank you for asking. I learned a lot and I contributed a lot. Very brief about what the circumstances were, and then you transition into a story about an achievement at that company, because you know, after all, it may have been for cause, it may have been a mistake of omission, something you didn't do, may have been something you did do. It's something probably you're never going to do again, you know, so it shouldn't drive a hiring decision. What you're able to contribute to their future success is what's really important. And so that's what you want to get to as quickly as possible. Okay. Now, if you have been involuntarily terminated and you kind of don't handle that question with confidence, you're going to get follow-up questions. So this is where the coaching comes in. We're going to go through the whole story and talk about how to answer that first question and also follow-up questions. So reach out to me via email and we'll set up a time to talk.
Great.
In general, you want to tell the truth, but you don't have to tell the god-awful truth. And you can talk about things that Mark has suggestions. I have suggestions too on how you can handle that. But it's a matter of saying, once you make your answer brief, and then you move into, but that brings me to why I'm here with you today. And you start saying, here's why I love this job and here's why I want you. So you move right off of that negative in that thing and move into this other topic, or what Mark was saying, give the example of an achievement or something like that. So you get off of that. You just don't answer that question and stop.
Right. All right, well, here is Walt's Facebook, his LinkedIn profile if you're interested in the signing up for his interview success workshop, Walt_Glass@yahoo.com. If you want to connect with Walt, please do, but be sure to send him a personal note. If you don't send him a personal note, just like if you send me a connection request and don't send me a personal note why we should connect, we won't connect with you. So please, please, please do that. All right. Coming up on Career DFW and Career USA, we've got programming every week. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we'll be doing effective resumes. You're welcome to submit a resume. Once the session gets started, you can get rid of the contact information at the top. If you want to hide your name, become Mickey Mouse, become Paul Anka, whoever you want to be that day, you can do that. This Friday, the North Dallas Plano Focus Group meeting Friday at 9:30 in the morning. A very interesting speaker about the one-page bio. So a lot of people get hung up on a resume, and I think a lot of times a bio is a much more viable document that you can be handing out at the beginning of a job search. You really shouldn't send the resume out until you have a job description. But before you have that job description, I think a one-page bio can really help sell you and maybe get that phone call for them to call you. So join us this Friday at 9:30. Next Tuesday, LinkedIn seminar on Tuesday at 1 o'clock will be with Terry Sullivan from BuzzPro. Terry is into social selling and how to sell yourself on LinkedIn. So please be sure to join us. And then next Wednesday, Mark McDonald, who leads the practice interview team, will be talking about how to be a confident candidate, lessons from the pit crew. So please join us again next Wednesday for Mark's presentation. All these sessions will be recorded and will be on the Career DFW Facebook page, the Career USA YouTube channel. Please check, follow, subscribe to both. We really would appreciate it. These are all the 13 series of lessons that are all currently on the Career USA YouTube channel and the Career DFW Facebook page. You can go back and watch any of those. And in August, we will start those all over again. So we will start presenting those sessions again in August. For those of you who go to Facebook, this is sort of a complicated screen. Hopefully the first thing you'll do is you'll click on like, the red arrow. And then if you want to see all the videos, if you click where the green arrow is, opens up the more window, and that's the window right above it. You click the blue arrow and it'll show you all the videos, and they're all in groups so you can find each one of them. On YouTube, if you click on the playlist button and then at the very bottom underneath the interviewing group of playlist, which says view full playlist, you'll be able to see all the lessons and everything that has been recorded, including this one, which I will upload to the channel a little bit later this afternoon. So please remember, Career DFW is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of the speakers and myself included, we're all volunteers. We're all here to help you land your next great opportunity. Career DFW survives on donations. Please consider when you do get your next opportunity, think about Career DFW, think about the help we provided. And if your company offers matching donations, we are registered with a couple of different of the national groups. If you don't happen to see us, please reach out to me. Let me get my name up, get the Career DFW name up onto your list so that we can, so your donation will double in value. So I want to thank everybody. Thank Walt very much for his presentation. Thank you very much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow for resumes, one-page bio on Friday, or sometime next week. Thank you very much.